You signed the law. You funded the plaque. So where the hell is it? Jamie Raskin slams a bronze memorial plaque onto the committee table. It gleams under the fluorescent lights, cold, untouched, forgotten. Speaker Mike Johnson stares at it frozen. You chant, "Never forget," but you forgot the officer who nearly died for you. Raskin holds up a photo of Officer Fanone in the ICU. Beneath the image, the inscription etched into the plaque. Their heroism will never be forgotten. And then dead silence. The kind of silence that says someone's about to be morally cornered on live television. Stay. Watch what happens when "never forget" becomes the biggest lie in the room. The hearing room falls into an expectant hush as Congressman Jamie Raskin adjusts his glasses and leans into the microphone. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his weathered face, etching deeper the lines that January 6th carved into his features. Behind him, a wall of American flags stands at attention, their fabric heavy with the weight of ceremony and broken promises. The law was passed. Raskin begins, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. The money was allocated. He pauses, letting the words settle into the consciousness of every person in the room. But the plaque still hasn't been mounted. A ripple of confusion moves through the gallery. Reporters lean forward, pens poised over notepads. This isn't how political hearings usually begin, not with such stark simplicity, not with such devastating understatement. Raskin's eyes sweep across the panel of Republican leadership, seated before him, their faces carefully arranged in masks of professional indifference. Speaker Mike Johnson shifts in his chair, his polished exterior betraying nothing. Beside him, Jim Jordan sits with the coiled tension of a man accustomed to deflecting uncomfortable truths. They are titans of political theater, masters of spin and misdirection. But today they face a different kind of performance, one where the script has already been written in blood and betrayal. We gather here today under the banner of Back the Blue. Raskin continues, his voice gaining strength with each word. We wear our flag pins with pride. We speak of heroes and sacrifice. We promise that their courage will never be forgotten. His hand reaches beneath the podium, producing a small bronze plaque, its surface gleaming under the harsh lights. This was supposed to honor the officers who defended our democracy on January 6th. It was supposed to remind every visitor to this building that heroism isn't just a word, it's a choice made in the face of unthinkable violence. The plaque catches the light, casting dancing reflections across the wall. In that moment, it becomes more than metal. An inscription, it transforms into a symbol of promises made and promptly abandoned, of rhetoric that crumbles under the weight of political expediency. But somewhere between the signing ceremony and the mounting, something extraordinary happened. Raskin's voice drops to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to strain forward. This simple piece of bronze became inconvenient. The heroes it was meant to honor became problematic. And so it sits gathering dust in a storage room, while the men and women it was meant to memorialize wonder if their sacrifice meant anything at all. The overhead projector flickers to life, casting an image across the screen that makes several people in the gallery gasp. It's a photograph of Officer Michael Fanone, but not the Michael Fanone from the recruitment posters or the department's public relations materials. This is Fanone in an ICU bed, his face a canvas of purple and black bruises, his eyes swollen shut, tubes snaking from his body like the tendrils of some medical octopus. Meet Officer Michael Fanone. Raskin says, his voice carrying the weight of a eulogy for the living. 20 years on the force. Father of 4. On January 6th, he was dragged into a crowd of rioters who beat him with flagpoles, tased him repeatedly, and threatened to kill him with his own weapon. They screamed, "Kill him!" with his own gun while he begged them to remember that he had children. The image changes. Now it's Fanone. In physical therapy, his movements slow and deliberate, each step a negotiation between will and wounded flesh. His hands shake as he reaches for simple objects, a cup of coffee, a doorknob, the memories of the man he used to be. Officer Fanone survived that day, but barely. He was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder. His career ended not with a retirement ceremony, but with a medical discharge. His pension was reduced. His health care coverage was questioned. The man who almost died defending this building has been fighting another battle ever since the battle to be remembered, to be supported, to be acknowledged as something more than collateral damage in democracy's darkest hour. Raskin produces a stack of papers, their edges crisp and bureaucratic. These are Officer Fanone's applications for additional federal support, medical assistance, counseling services, disability compensation. He lets the papers fall one by one onto the table with soft thuds that sound like falling hopes. Denied. Delayed. Referred to other departments. Lost in bureaucratic shuffle. This is how we honor our heroes, ladies and gentlemen, with paperwork designed to exhaust them into silence. The camera finds Fanone himself in the gallery, sitting quietly among the crowd. His presence is both commanding and fragile, a man still carrying the weight of democracy on shoulders that shouldn't have to bear such a burden. His eyes meet Raskin's, and in that moment, an entire conversation passes between them, one built on shared understanding of what it means to serve a system that doesn't always serve back. Officer Fanone didn't ask to become a symbol, Raskin continues. He just did his job. But in doing his job on that terrible day, he became something more. He became living proof that heroism isn't a political stance. It's a human choice. And the way we treat our heroes reveals everything about who we really are. The temperature in the room seems to drop as Raskin turns his attention to Speaker Johnson. The cameras zoom in on Johnson's face, capturing the micro-expressions that betray the careful political mask he wears. His jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. His fingers drum a nervous rhythm on the table's edge. "Mr. Speaker." Raskin begins, his tone deceptively conversational. The Memorial Plaque Authorization Act was signed into law 8 months ago. The appropriation was approved. The design was finalized. The installation was scheduled. And yet, he gestures to the empty wall behind the speaker's chair where a plaque should hang but doesn't. Silence. Johnson clears his throat, a sound that seems to echo in the chamber like a confession. Congressman Raskin, as you well know, the implementation of commemorative installations requires careful coordination between multiple departments. There are protocols, procedures. Protocols. Raskin interrupts, pulling out a bound document that lands on the table with authority. Like this budget allocation showing $15,000 designated specifically for memorial plaques related to January 6th incidents money that was approved, allocated, and then what happened to it, Mr. Speaker? The document slides across the table toward Johnson, who doesn't reach for it. Instead, his eyes dart to Jim Jordan, a silent plea for intervention that speaks volumes about the desperation beneath his composed exterior. Furthermore, Raskin continues his momentum building like a prosecutor closing in on a verdict, while this simple plaque, this $200 piece of bronze honoring fallen officers, sits forgotten in storage. Your office has processed dozens of support requests for January 6th defendants. Legal aid, character witnesses, victim impact statement challenges. The juxtaposition hangs in the air like smoke from a fired gun. In the gallery, reporters scribble frantically, sensing the shift in narrative dynamics. This isn't just about a missing plaque anymore. It's about a fundamental question of priority of values, of who gets remembered and who gets erased. Jordan finally speaks, his voice carrying the familiar edge of someone accustomed to turning defense into offense. Congressman Raskin, I think you're conflating legitimate legal support with what Mr. Jordan Raskin's interruption is swift and surgical. With remembering Officer Fanone's sacrifice, with honoring the men and women who protected us while others planned our destruction. His voice rises, filling the chamber with the kind of moral clarity that makes politicians uncomfortable. You can't simultaneously claim to back the blue while stabbing them in the back with bureaucratic neglect. The silence that follows is pregnant with implications. In that moment, the hearing room becomes a courtroom, and the jury is not just the panel before Raskin, but every American watching, every voter wondering what their representatives really stand for when the cameras aren't rolling. Raskin reaches into his briefcase with the deliberate care of a magician about to perform his most devastating trick. The document he produces is unremarkable in appearance, standard government letterhead, crisp typing, official seals. But the words contained within carry the power to shatter carefully constructed narratives. This, he announces holding the paper aloft, is an internal memorandum dated March 15th, 2024. From the Office of the Speaker to the House Administration Committee. The paper trembles slightly in his hand, not from nervousness, but from the weight of revelation it carries. Subject line: postponement of January 6th memorial elements. The room goes silent in the way that only happens when truth arrives uninvited to a party built on lies. Johnson's face drains of color. Jordan's habitual smirk vanishes like smoke in wind. Even the stenographer's fingers pause over her machine as if the machinery of record-keeping itself holds its breath. I'll read the relevant passage. Raskin continues, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. In light of the approaching election cycle, it is recommended that we postpone any memorial installations or commemorative elements related to the January 6th incident. Such displays may serve to remind voters of divisive imagery and could prove counterproductive to our messaging strategy. Focus should remain on forward-looking initiatives rather than backward-facing commemorations. The words hang in the air like an indictment. In the gallery, someone's sharp intake of breath cuts through the silence. Reporters lean forward, sensing the moment when political theater becomes genuine drama. Divisive imagery. Raskin repeats his voice, carrying the kind of moral outrage that cannot be scripted or manufactured. That's what you call Officer Fanone's sacrifice. Counterproductive to messaging strategy, that's how you describe honoring the men and women who saved our democracy. He sets the memo down and reaches for the bronze plaque, holding it up so the light catches its inscription. The words are simple, elegant, in honor of the brave law enforcement officers who defended the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Their heroism will never be forgotten. Never forgotten. Raskin reads aloud, his voice thick with irony. These words were crafted, carefully approved, unanimously inscribed in bronze, but apparently never has an expiration date. Apparently, heroism becomes inconvenient when it threatens to remind voters of uncomfortable truths. He turns to face Fanone in the gallery, the plaque still held high. Officer Fanone, you nearly died protecting this building, protecting the people in it, protecting the very democratic process that Memo seeks to manipulate. You were beaten unconscious by people chanting, "Hang Mike Pence" and "Stop the steal." And now, the people you protected have decided that remembering your sacrifice is bad politics. Fanone's face remains stoic, but his eyes glisten with something that might be tears, or might be rage, or perhaps both inseparably intertwined. Raskin turns back to the panel, the plaque now pointing at them like an accusation made manifest in bronze. So I ask you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Jordan, if Officer Fanone's heroism will never be forgotten, then why does he feel erased? If you truly back the blue, then why does the badge he wore mean less than the votes you're chasing? The questions echo in the chamber, unanswered and unanswerable, because the truth they contain is too damaging to acknowledge and too obvious to deny. The hearing room has taken on the quality of a cathedral in the moments before judgment, heavy with expectation, thick with the weight of moral reckoning. Raskin stands at his podium, no longer just a congressman, but something more primal, a voice for the forgotten, a guardian of inconvenient truths. We began today with a simple question about a missing plaque. He says, his voice carrying the authority of someone who has moved beyond politics into the realm of fundamental human decency. But we've discovered something far more troubling than bureaucratic inefficiency. We've uncovered a deliberate erasure, a conscious choice to forget heroes when remembering them becomes politically inconvenient. He walks around the podium, closing the physical distance between himself and the panel, making the confrontation intimate and inescapable. You see, forgetting isn't always an accident. Sometimes it's a strategy. Sometimes never forget becomes please forget, when the memories threaten the narrative. The bronze plaque seems to glow in his hands, transformed from a simple commemorative object into something approaching the sacred. This plaque represents more than bronze, an inscription. It represents a promise, a covenant between a democracy and those who bleed for it. And when we break that covenant, when we prioritize political calculation over human dignity, we don't just betray individuals, we betray the very idea of service itself. Raskin's eyes find the camera looking directly through the lens to the millions of Americans watching. His gaze is unflinching, uncompromising, the look of a man who has seen democracy's darkest day and refuses to let it be rewritten by those who would sanitize history for electoral advantage. "Officer Michael Fanone," he says, turning once more to the gallery, along with hundreds of other law enforcement officers, didn't choose to become political symbols. They chose to do their jobs on a day when doing their job meant facing down an armed mob. They chose to protect people who may have disagreed with them politically. They chose to defend a system that doesn't always defend them back. The emotion in his voice is raw now, unfiltered by political consideration. And in return, we've given them paperwork, delays, denials. And now, thanks to this memo, we know that their sacrifice has been deemed politically inconvenient. Their heroism has been marked as counterproductive to messaging strategy. He places the plaque gently on the table before him, the soft sound it makes seeming to reverberate through the chamber. But here's what I want everyone watching to understand. You don't get to say, "never forget," if you're the ones doing the forgetting. You don't get to claim you backed the blue while stabbing them in the back with red tape. And you sure as hell don't get to turn human sacrifice into a political calculation. The silence that follows is different from the previous pauses in the hearing. This isn't the silence of surprise or even shock. It's the silence of recognition, the moment when truth cuts through spin so cleanly that there's nothing left to say. The question before us isn't really about a plaque. Raskin concludes, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in to catch his words. It's about who we are when we think nobody's watching. It's about what we do with heroism when it becomes inconvenient. It's about whether "never forget" means anything at all, or if it's just another campaign slogan we use until the polls suggest otherwise. He picks up the plaque one final time, holding it not as evidence, but as something approaching a relic. This piece of bronze was supposed to hang on a wall somewhere in this building, reminding every visitor that democracy isn't free, that freedom isn't guaranteed, and that sometimes ordinary people do extraordinary things when the moment demands it. Instead, it sits in storage gathering dust, while the people it was meant to honor wonder if their sacrifice meant anything at all. The camera slowly pans across the faces in the chamber. Johnson's carefully controlled neutrality, Jordan's defensive hostility, Fanone's quiet dignity. The reporter scribbling frantically to capture a moment that feels larger than politics. "I submit to you." Raskin says his final words, carrying the weight of prophecy, that how we treat our heroes reveals everything about who we really are. And right now, that reflection isn't very flattering. The camera fades to black, then slowly reveals a different scene entirely. In a forgotten corner of the Capitol complex, in a storage room filled with the detritus of democracy, old furniture, forgotten files, abandoned initiatives, sits a simple bronze plaque on a metal shelf. The inscription gleams, despite the dust, in honor of the brave law enforcement officers who defended the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Their heroism will never be forgotten. But in this room where memory goes to die, surrounded by the forgotten promises of 1,000 political seasons, the words feel less like a promise and more like an epitaph for ideals we once claimed to hold sacred. The camera holds on the plaque for a long moment, then slowly pulls back, revealing the vastness of forgotten things, the warehouse of abandoned commitments, the storage facility where democracy keeps the parts of itself it no longer finds convenient to remember. And in that silence, in that dust-covered shrine to broken promises, the real question lingers. If heroism can be stored away when it becomes politically inconvenient, what does that say about the heroes themselves? What does that say about us? The screen fades to black one final time, leaving only the echo of Raskin's words. You don't get to say, "Never forget," if you're the ones doing the forgetting. In the darkness, we're left with the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the greatest betrayals come not from enemies, but from the very systems we trust to honor what matters most.